and for his blessings. He has now come in our midst. He's with us. We don't see him as a spook. Right. That's right. He's no spook. He's a live man. He's a living God. I'm sorry that I have not asked you to sit down. You look so beautiful, and I don't want you to sit down.
And a guest, and maybe he could help me to convey a message to you. He's my friend. I like him a lot, and I'm going to tell you why I brought him in and why I think he's important to the future of you learning about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And his name is Yosef bin Asiel Israel. Salam alaikum.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, who appeared in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, to whom righteous and holy praise is forever due, we thank that great God for his coming to the wilderness of North America to raise up amongst us the first begotten from the dead, that special soul. I speak none other than the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. In those holy and righteous names, I greet you in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. We'll be right back after these quick commercials. Looking for something that feels good, looks great, and stands the test of time? Well, we have it for you. Black Royalty is our athleisure line that is made from the finest bamboo and cotton blend. We have designed high quality tracksuit and t-shirts in multiple colors that provide you the most comfort when you need it most. Whether you're in the gym or running errands or just lounging around with loved ones, you need to be in the best quality clothing as possible. We have constructed a high quality clothing line that does not break the bank, and we beat out all of our competitors on price. So please, if you're interested in being comfortable, not just in the gym, but when you're running around and doing errands, please visit blackroyaltywear.com. Also, you can find us on Instagram at Black Royalty. And if you have any questions or comments about our brand and how you can help participate, you can find us at blackroyaltywear@gmail.com. We'll be quick to answer your questions, and with our responses, we will be very thorough. So also, like I said, Black Royalty is for you because it was made by you with the intentions of serving you. So leave all those other clothing lines behind and get on what makes sense, something that's going to stand the test of time, because black don't crack. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back again to another installment of Know Thyself Radio Show, where we make it our business, our duty, our responsibility to give you nothing but the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And as always, it's an honor, a privilege, a blessing to come here on this platform, which is dedicated to the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, to come and bear witness to his greatness, his glory, and the knowledge that was taught to him by God Almighty, who appeared in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, to whom righteous and holy praise is forever due. And we are so grateful, so thankful for that God, for leaving his glory, for coming amongst us, the destitute of this planet, the downtrodden of this planet, those who were labeled deaf, dumb, and blind, here in the wilderness of North America, to seek out that special one who we would impregnate with a superior knowledge that would return the black man and the black woman back to its original glory. So I'm so grateful and honored to thank Master Fard Muhammad, God in person, and his messenger, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And though I do not like to date my shows, this one I think is significant because it correlates with the discussion and conversation. It relates to the topic we're going to be dialoguing about. Well, that I'm going to be speaking about, and you will be listening, and you can have dialogue with yourself as you internalize what is being said through this microphone coming through to your speakers. But it is November 5th, a Tuesday, meaning that it has elections that are taking place all over the country, whether it be certain governors, congressmen, whether it be city comptrollers and different district leaders. I want us to understand that a lot of times, though it's not a national election, as we prepare for next year's national election, though it's so much hype and build up around the national election, we know that it's mainly a distraction. What are you saying, Yusuf? The election determines the president, or our elections are a vital part of our democracy. It's a part that we must participate in because it's the quintessential essence of America in the ability to determine our future by electing our officials, which come from our communities. You're right, in theory. But we know the reality of this system was built on the abuse, the murder, the outright hatred of the original black man and woman. And every facet, every detail, every intricate part of this system plays and promotes that reality, whether we are conscious or cognitive of that reality or not. And the election is no different. So I'm going to go to Fall of America. The most honorable Elijah Muhammad Wade talked about the election. But if I go into that, I want us to understand that, take this for example. Some people say that, yeah, you're right about the national election. You know, those are not really in the hands because they are determined not by the individual popular vote, but by the electoral college, which we know has a different, in a lot of cases, voting record than the people, meaning that one candidate can win the popular vote but lose the national election. So in actuality, the people do not determine their president. Safeguards that are put in place by the so-called American government to ensure that their plan goes as it was originally intended. But one would interject into the conversation, well, on the more local level, that is not the reality. Because I'm seeing our brothers and sisters who run for office, who do great things, who are able to make certain changes, and who we have benefited from. And I would say, to a certain extent, you are correct. But the reality of those who are in lower level office or local office, their change is not the significant change that is needed for the black man and woman to be truly prosperous in this country. It's minuscule because they are still trying to go by the rules that has been created by a system to keep black men and women in an inferior state. So by those rules, by those laws, by those ordinances, you will always be in a perpetual state of servitude. Because you're trying to play a game that was created to always make sure that you are the loser no matter what the outcome may seem to be. Now, I know for a lot of people that may be devastating because we have people that we have voted for that we may personally know. We may be elected officials ourselves. But look at this reality. Think about all the black elected officials throughout history or at this present moment. Has it changed the circumstances as a collective, as a situation? Because a lot of us go into these environments with what? A certain precept. What do I mean by that precept? That we must play the game. meaning that we must emulate what we see white people do as they relates to how they govern themselves and how they run their political parties. That's why in almost every instance, we're never independent, nor are we in a position to create, concoct, develop our own party, but we're willing participants, especially in this dispensation of time, but throughout the history of America's voting era, we have always joined on to the party of our oppressor, whether it be the Republican Party or the Democratic. They're both two sides of the same coin, interchangeable. As we will look throughout history, that at one point we voted heavily as a black people Republican due to the correlation of Abraham Lincoln so-called emancipating the slaves. And then, though a lot of people credit Kennedy for the assimilation of blacks into the Democratic Party, it was mostly Lyndon Baines Johnson with the passing of the Civil Rights Act, which had a direct benefit to white people and did not really benefit directly black people, as we see that things and circumstances really didn't change. And if you look post 1968, outside of those who were participants in the Nation of Islam through its rise into the fall and the departure of the true intent of the Nation of Islam by the departure of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, due to his removal of his presence from us, you were in a state of decline. Black people were confused. Black people were left outdoors. Black people had a more of an integrationist mindset, which kept them in a position of always being a second-class citizen, no matter how much money they made, no matter how much influence they may have seemed to accumulate, or even if they were in a position to enact change. That change did not come in relationship to things that would free us from our slave masters, would detach us from our oppressors, but would further keep our slave masters, our oppressors, foot on our neck. Hypothetically and realistically, as we see in so many instances and cases, the attack of police and racially motivated vigilantes, which is the mentality of most white people. Some are just a little bit more ferocious with their approach and their implementation of their racism and their hate for you. And so it comes out in a more physical manner, but it's all that the stain is in all of their hearts, and especially on all of their minds, whether they are overt with it or covert with it. But we're going to have a real discussion tonight because it's imperative that we start to look at things with a different lens. We look at it with a different view, because we've been doing the same thing over and over again, and we keep wondering why it has not yielded any different results. But how can it? How can you perpetually do what you know in your heart of hearts will not produce change? And a lot of it, in my humble opinion, from what I've been taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is due to fear. It's due to the idea that no matter what, the white man's God, and I'm just his servant. I'm just his slave. Even if you don't articulate it, your mentality, your actions represent a mentality of that who not just knows his place, but does not want to change his place. You enjoy being at the tail and seeing him at the head. That's why you try to make your head look more like him. And those who can't, put their heads in his tail, if you understand what I'm saying. So we try to kiss up to them, try to gain favor with them, because we feel that may give us some reprieve of the onslaught of hate, murder, and mayhem that has rained down on our people for centuries. But the reality of it is that it does not. They see you as less than, no matter how much you grovel, beg, or capitulate. It does not give you at any point, some type of let up from what they intend to do. Now, the idea of this election. We know that even on a local level, even on state level, city level, different municipalities, that the system of the voting in certain elected officials is, in pardon the cheap expression, janky to say the least. Meaning that it is easily manipulated and controlled by whoever sees fit. And there's so many ways to determine a so-called free democratic election. Meaning that the people really don't have the power. Those who seek to manipulate it have the ability to do so with fairly easy results. Most people who are not concerned nor connected to the process of actually understanding what it means to make a vote and where does it go and how is it counted and what happens therefore after, make votes aimlessly if they participate in the political process without understanding what is the necessary steps that have to go after that. Meaning we punch a piece of paper or we go to an electronic booth and we make our selections, not understanding that all of those are forms of manipulation that are controlled by somebody else, because you are basing your decision to pick that elected official on the morality of somebody else. But how can you trust somebody or a system of people who have been grown and raised and developed to have hate for the black man and woman? So whatever they do is not in the best interest of the black man and woman, even if it be the black man or woman, because we see our people on a consistent basis do things that are adversarial to their own best interests. Whenever we try to develop, create, or concoct some type of idea that may be advantageous for our people, that may push us down the road, that may give us some type of progress, our own people are the first to attack, because like I said earlier, one, we fear the white man, and second, we think that that would give us favor with them. So we take the approach of, hey master, I can take him out for you. You don't have to get your hands dirty. That goes back to previous episodes that I've been talking about, the making of the perfect slave, and that goes into an attribute or characteristic of what the perfect slave displays. But the reality is there nevertheless. And so since we don't control the system that we are in to develop a fair and honest election, we can ensure that that's their reality. And so in a lot of instances, even those who have some type of benevolent intent never seem to make it. Or those who do make it attach themselves to the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or any existing party that was created and concocted by white people that we see. Once you get into party lines, you have to play by party rules, meaning that the number one rule is you can't do nothing for the Negroes. You can give them superficial things that don't have any real tangible benefits, but when it comes to actually putting them in a position of power economically, educationally, intellectually, psychologically, that's null and void. And our people wonder why we see black faces, but we're not able to create and hold a freedom for the black race. It's because we have taken on the mind, the desires, the intent of our slave master. Because we have individualized ourselves and thinking that we have made it due to the circumstances and situations, though in a lot of cases, our own people are the reason that we are even in that position in the first place. And because we came in the same environment as them and we wanted the same thing as them, once we got to said place, we had lost track of our original reason, purpose, and motivation for even getting there. But that's going to continue to happen. Because until you separate from that way of thinking, most importantly, you will forever be an embedder, an aid to the demise of our people. Because you are the accessory to the murder of the black men and women by helping promote and prolong the system which is so taught by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad that we know has to fall for God to bring into existence a new kingdom of righteousness, truth, peace, justice, and equality. But you think you're going to bring in peace using the old infrastructure, the old system that's already created. It can't happen. It won't happen. No matter how much you wish and hope and pray that something will be different, the reality of it is it will never be. Because you have to do the work of creating your own. The beautiful thing about what we have done with Know Thyself Radio, we've shown you that the work really, or the blueprint, has already been established. You just have to participate. You don't have to come up with a new idea. The messenger has already given us the plan, the structure, the know-how, the wherewithal, and the exact form of execution that is needed to be successful. Not just momentarily, but for ever into perpetuity. Now, think about on a national level, things that we know about that has been done throughout history, that has been identified as rigged elections. You got the 2000, which we know was a real rigged election. And I'm talking about the U.S. presidential election. You got 2004, when we know George Bush and John Kerry, and how the omission and mistakes that happened in Minnesota with the ballots, that people were voting for John Edward instead of John Kerry, which caused a big discrepancy in other states like Ohio. See, these are all forms of manipulation in elections. They're not just unethical, but downright egregious in the sense that you got people thinking that something else is happening that's not. You got an example of the 2002 Senate election in New Hampshire, when the incumbent Senator Bob Smith's decision to step down from his seat to run for the U.S. presidency as an independent candidate. He claimed that the Republican Party wasn't the ideal, so he went independent. That the campaign was using phone jamming scandals by telemarketer firms that was hired by the Republican Party to tamper with the elections, so that all of these operation centers, phones would be jammed for the Democratic call centers. And people went to jail for that. 4 men were prosecuted for their role in the scandal. You got the U.S. presidential election of 1960 in here in Illinois, when John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon were going back and forth, when Kennedy won by 0.17% of the votes, despite Nixon winning popular votes in 26 states. Kennedy's victory was credited to the Roman Catholic support base and economic recession of 1957. But in actuality, you had people who committed fraud in several states, like here in Illinois, which Papa Daley was a main component of, and down in Texas, which he had a margin in Illinois of only 0.2%. But because he won Texas and Illinois and places like that, Nixon, even though he won 92 of the 101 counties in Illinois, he still lost. But even in that case, Republicans rejected the results, while 650 people were arrested and charged with voter fraud. But that didn't change the election, even though we know Nixon was a criminal too. They all criminals, and that's one of the points I'm going to make today. It doesn't matter, and the message is going to make, no matter who you vote for, they're all crooks, they all criminals, they all have the same agenda. But I'm just showing you, even in their world, they lie and deceive each other. So what the hell do you think they're going to do to you? You're not even a thought as it relates to being honest and fair. You got the 2006 Virginia U.S. Senate election, with George Allen losing a narrow amount to Jim Webb, who was a Democratic candidate, who was initially favored to win the race. But we know Webb's campaign team, who was one of his members, who was an Indian ancestry, the allegations considered affected his campaign, leading his defeat by a margin of only 0.3%. But the election involving both candidates were both shown that they opted to use a form of voter fraud manipulation on both parts. And that's why at the end, Allen had an option for requesting a recount, but opted to concede defeat because he didn't want to be labeled a sore loser. But in reality, he didn't want to be exposed himself for the voter fraud that happened. So, I mean, I can keep going on and on and on. 2010, the Maryland state governor election, you can look that up. You can look up the New York Senate election of 1891. You can look up Kansas election of 1855, which was one that I think you all should look up, because you're talking about when the Kansas and Nebraska Act was enacted by President Franklin Pierce in 1854. This was one that was due to violence. They kept those residents from participating in the election. And you can go down the list. U.S. President election of 1876, the governor race of New York State of 1793, and so forth and so on. And that's not going to every election where black people were kept through arbitrary voting laws, poll taxes, so forth and so on, that would not allow them, literacy laws that would not allow them to vote for a process that was already put in place to keep them in servitude. What am I saying? I'm saying, yes, voting does have its place, and you can use it to have some type of benefit. But if you lose track of developing something for self, if you lose track of trying to create your own world, your own nation, you will always be a victim and you will always be a loser in this world. If you're going to be a free people, you have to start thinking freely. The white man didn't vote for his freedom, he fought for it. And all over this world, he didn't go into Africa voting his way into power, he took it over. Am I telling you to pick up arms and go against white men? Absolutely not. But I'm telling you to use your intelligence to find a way to be independent of your enemy. And don't be afraid to fight those who fight with you. Now let's go to the messenger. This is in page 36, chapter 8, the national election. And it reads, "The black man of America has been privileged by the slave master's children for the last century to vote, for whites, for the officials to judge and rule. This freedom to vote has made the black man in America feel very dignified and proud of himself. He goes to the polls very happy to vote for a white ruler. Today, he is gradually changing to a desire to vote for his own kind for such offices of authority." Now, even in that, you got to realize we still look at our elected officials, even if they share the same skin complexion, to the mindset and mentality of the white oppressor. So they can't be too black in their thought pattern, in their articulation, in their message, because then that will turn us off, because we feel that won't be something that will attract the masses. Because we won't remember in Obama, we want a president for the whole American people and not the one that just looks out for black people, though we have been disappointed, looked out and left out for since ever as it relates to this country. You have never been taken a priority, and you never will be, because remember, you were brought here as slaves, you were brought here as cattle, you were brought here as merchandise. And that mentality still reigns supreme as it relates to the actions that are produced by those who are in power in this country. We must remember that our vote is strong and powerful only when and where the white man can use it to get into office over his white opponent. Teach. After the election and the victory, there are very few favors that come from his office to the black voters who helped and aided him in getting into office. Why? Because he does not owe the black voter anything as long as he has to feed, clothe, and shelter him. Think about this now. Your presence alone, they feel, is your blessing. You don't have to actually get anything. You shouldn't get anything. You should just be happy that they don't kill you right then and there. And a lot of our people have adopted that mentality and feel that that's enough. That we don't have to actually have anything that's tangible. We can take trickle-down things that white people are able to benefit from, that we can attach ourselves to arbitrarily to try to find some type of validation in our decision to continue to be a slave. The black vote could be cast or not cast. The white citizens of the government are going to win and continue to rule anyway. There is much talk of this man and that man who shall vote of the people put in the White House for the next 4 years. How much good have the two parties, Republican and Democrat, done for us the last century in the way of freedom, justice, and equality? The message is he's really making it plain and simple. There's never been a case where either party has been beneficial to our people. Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was the one I said earlier, who signed into law the Civil Rights Act, was a staunch racist, hated black people, hated everything about them. The so-called Kennedys, who loved black people, that everybody thought it was John F. Kennedy's brother who made sure that King stayed under wiretap, and many others. Know your enemy. Know his nature, and you can never be fooled. Back to the messenger of God. Regardless of what party wins, the die is always the set against us, the black people here in America. Injustice, crooked politics, and the breeding of corruption under crooked politics have been practiced ever since Adam to the present day rulers. Adam was the first crook. There has not been justice for the black man in this race of people. And this is why the race suffers from the effect of chaos today. There are black politicians who would like to use their black people for selfish greed and will throw them behind any crook with money. Black politicians of this type have sold their black brothers to suffering and shame for self-elevation with the crook. This elevation is one of the most serious in the history of American government, because either party that seeks the office of the presidency is faced with the problem of saving the lives of the people in America. And the present-day party, Democratic, remains in office, you know the answer. If the Republican Party takes over, you should know the same answer. There will be a lull before the storm. Storm can be delayed, and every hour and day that it can be delayed is to your benefit. The black man should be very serious and careful about his voting, because 90% of the black votes cast are cast by ones who do not have knowledge of what they are casting their vote for. I still say, as I have said for many years, vote for Allah God to be your ruler. Come follow me. Now that couldn't have been said any more clearer than what the messenger said. If we keep trying to exclude God out of the equation, out of the solution, we're going to forever and perpetually be in a state of destitute. You don't have a future without enacting and invoking the God, the living God, and his messenger. You don't have a future. You don't have a prospect. You don't have a chance. What am I saying? I'm saying, and I'm going to show an example. Even if you do have a circumstance where black people in this system that we're in right now have a plan, enact a plan, devise a plan, and then start to elect those officials and become prominent, what will happen then? The white man will use, when deceit and lies and deception doesn't work anymore, his number one tool, his number one asset, and that's violence. Outright murder to try to destroy you. And I want to go to an example. And a lot of our people know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and know about the reality of those type of cities. But very few are familiar with 1898 in this month of November in Wilmington, North Carolina, how after Election Day, even in which was a situation where Wilmington had developed a strong economic base comprised of intelligent black men and women who had coalesced their ideas, their intelligence, their ingenuity to do for what it seemed somewhat for self. But because their success was contingent on the system that had already been enacted, that same one that was meant to destroy them, inevitably it will come back to bite them in the behind. And so you had a situation where a mob of 2,000 plus white men not just expelled black leaders and so-called white race traders, but destroyed the property of the black residents of the city and killed dozens and hundreds of dozens of people in the city, which would later be brushed under the rug as one of the most atrocious acts of domestic terrorism that was ever enacted on this land. But you got to realize the only real terrorist in the world and domestically here in America has been the white man. It has never been nobody else at the level that he has been able to. Even when you have so-called Arabs that do have terrorist acts, it's still the white Arab. Very rarely and seldomly do you see black men in any place take on acts of terrorism. Now, it may be brandished as terrorism, but they are just fighting back due to the harsh circumstances and situations they've been placed under. The white man doesn't like something. He doesn't accept something, even if it's by the rules that he had set. He comes in and uses violence as the answer and the solution for his problems. Listen to what I'm saying. Wilmington, North Carolina had elected representatives into the House, to Congress, and had developed a flourishing community. And they were under the Republican Party because, like I said earlier, due to Abraham Lincoln, that's what we had affinity to. They were able to be successful, but you had white men who were in that area and surrounding areas who didn't even live in Wilmington have such a hate and disdain and see, hey, how can these niggas, only a couple decades after so-called slavery, even though a lot of our people still in slavery, different forms, and the one that it was used to be called in the antebellum South, the chattel slavery, how can they be so prosperous, so successful? Because you've always been great. Even with all the odds stacked against you, you find a way to still overcome your circumstance and your situation, because you're the original man on this planet, the god of planet Earth, the cream of the planet Earth. But because of that hatred, and they were doing so bad, they devised a way first to create what was called the Populist Party, which would connect themselves to the Republican Party and make a joint effort that they would allow more of their white constituency to be elected in those seats, removing most of the blacks. Now, that was one approach that the whites did, a more deceptive way by using a softer approach, an integrationist approach, an abolitionist approach. But they were still able to take the power away, or so-called power away, from the black man, and we willingly gave into it. But for the others, the outright white extremists, they said, oh, that's not good enough. The Democratic Party said, we're going to go into Wilmington on November 4th, or the November date of the election, and we're going to stop every black person from going in to voting for who they seek to vote for. So they created an armed faction called the Red Shirts that would use force, murder, and any other way that they were able to put to a halt those voters from going in and voting for those black men, and even some of the white men who were part of the Populist Party who joined forces with the Republicans. Because you got to realize the white supremacists has two sides. You got the white supremacists who use more of a integrationist approach, plays the nice guy, still has the same intent. And then you got the extremists who says, hey, I don't want no Negroes. I have no even semblance of idea of freedom or justice. I want to just be totally oppressive. And that's what the Democratic Party at that time in that city represented, and used their armed faction, which was the Red Shirts, to go and prevent those black people from voting. And due to that reality, see, I'm telling you how, if you're not conscious of what's going on, will happen in this day and time. Not that long ago that this happened, and it still happens in a lot of places. But they're getting back, and you see all these racially motivated murders and killings that's happening all around the country in 2018, 2019, going into 2020. What do you think they're gearing up for? You think they're going to let their boy, Donald Trump, just not be elected, or anybody else who has that type of mentality? You hear what I'm saying? The Democratic Party at the time not only used, listen to what I'm saying now, used their armed force to stop every black voter from casting their vote to vote their black constituents in, which allowed them to overwhelmingly win the elected official seats because only their people could vote. The ones who are already elected, whose seats were not up for at that time, who still had a longer term, they went into the city and killed and murdered and made a lot of them leave their posts. And they were able to justify it by the idea of saying that if we let these black people be successful, they're going to be rapers and murderers of our women. Now, we know nobody murders and rapes any type of women, black women, white women, as the white man has done. As you see, even in this day and time, you got the Weinsteins, the Harvey Weinsteins, and Ed Burke, even in being the homosexual community and so forth and so on, killing and raping in mass numbers. But what did they do? They put those guys on the back burner. Kevin Spacey, they put those guys on the back burner. And the person that he was accused of molesting and raping ended up dead, hit by a car, and his charges were dropped. That's how white supremacy works. But for guys like R. Kelly, and Bill Cosby, who they want to paint the face for the Me Too movement, even though we know white men disproportionately are the purveyors of that type of filth as it relates to the implementation of it. They have to put a black face on it because they have to justify you being demonized and criminalized at all costs. Tactics they've been using for hundreds of years. Now, going back to 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina, that was the act that justified them going in to murder those people. And they did so. And our people, because we didn't understand the importance of setting up protection mechanisms, our own armed forces, our own security, we fell victim. And we didn't learn when it came to other communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, which would happen maybe 20 years later, the same thing, so forth and so on. Rosewood. I mean, we can go down the list. Countless examples. History is replete with them. Because we refuse to learn and listen. Due to that, not only did they remove everyone from office, kill those who opposed them, they memorialized the perpetuators and the antagonists of that reality as heroes, named streets after them, named schools after them, created monuments and statues as they rewrote history in a way that showed them in a favorable light. But in the eye of white supremacy, they were heroes. So how else would they show them? But that's the reality you live in because you want to be stuck in that system instead of creating your own. You try to, even our own people, try to criticize the messenger for having our people get checked when they come into the mosque, but you see why. We learn from history. We learn from the realities that people don't have our best interests in mind and they need to be checked. We need to be guarded. We need to protect what we value more than anything is our own lives. It wasn't just for the protection of the messenger, it was to protect you, those who participated, came to the mosque, to make sure that you don't have people like in this day Dylan Roofs and come into the churches and shoot everybody down because you want that acceptance of white people, that you'll just allow any and everybody to come in unchecked. You gotta wake up, people. Let the realities of history and this present moment hit you to the core, to the fact that it does something, that it acts an idea of action. And that's why we point to the messenger, because he and he alone has been an example here in the wilderness of North America of what a free black man is and how a free black man lives his life and how he protects his nation and his people. These are the examples that need to be promoted. And we know that nobody's going to do it for us, that the white man is not going to do it, that our people who want favor from the white man are not going to do it, so you have to do it. And I bear witness that once we do it, our circumstances and situations will change overnight. But please, don't just be one who uplifts him in words, do it in actions. Go out there and do your part, that you are able to participate in the development of your own nation so that you can really have freedom, justice, and equality on this earth. And so that you don't be another example of Wilmington, North Carolina, of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and any other example of our people who thought that we'll be able to find our way through it and gain some success, ultimately in that when white boy gets down to the nitty gritty, his last option and his first option will always be murder and mayhem. He will kill you. There's no question about that. It's not even a thought in his mind. He will kill you. And he has taught us to kill ourselves. So I beg you to take heed to the words of the messenger of Allah, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And let's do for self. Let's separate from our slave master. And let's be a free, independent people. Let's not look at these systems, these elections, and none of the things that they've created that we have developed for them as a solution. But let's use our own mind again for our development of ourselves. They've had our mind, our energy, our efforts for too long, hundreds of years. It's time to use that mind, use those energy, use those efforts, use that intellect, use the ingenuity for self to develop a world of peace and prosperity. Be intelligent, black man. Be dutiful. Be disciplined. Be diligent. Be aware. Do not immerse yourself into the foolishness that is happening all around us, but be a participant in the world that will bring into existence a better reality for us all. One that we control, that is governed by Almighty God, Allah. Thank you for listening. As I leave in the words of peace. Assalamu Alaikum.